Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm going to start sharing my own screen, and that way we can just start off the evening that way. Let's see. I guess it's this one. And then we go up. Yeah. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Maybe some hands in the air or something. Then I know. All right. I see some thumbs up. Good. Thank you. So, let's go to the top here. There it is. So the event's going to be about drought tonight, and we have three speakers: Melle Nikkels, Schrijver, and Klarien Klingen. And we're so happy that you guys can make it tonight. But first off, let's start off with Stichting Boerengroep, the Peasant Foundation in English, or the Farmers Foundation. So who are we? We're a group of critical students thinking about what the university is doing and trying to connect the university's goals and research topics with the reality and challenges of farmers in the Netherlands, but also worldwide. And that entails a lot of social and just sustainable food production systems. We try to promote those kinds of things. And how do we promote those kinds of things? Well, we organize critical discussions. We have excursions. We invite farmers to come speak at the university. And maybe something that's coming up for this summer. We have a summer school called the Farm Experience Internships, and that you can still sign up for that if you're interested. You can get free study credits for that, and you learn all about agroecology. So very much welcome to join, and very much welcome to join other activities of Boerengroep. Um, so welcome, Loda. Nice you can make it. So tonight we will be discussing water drought and the role of farmers. And to start us off, it's going to look like this. We'll be starting with Melle Nikkels, and that'll be anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes for each speaker. And afterwards, we'll have 5 minutes for clarification questions. And also some space for the speakers to react to each other if they also have specific questions. Towards the end, we would like to open up the discussion a bit further and have everybody participate. And we also have two statements prepared, and we'd like the speakers to react on that. Whoever feels like reacting on that, but we'll get to that later. Our first speaker is Melle Nikkels. I think I need to make this smaller and everyone can see. There we go. Yeah, so Melle, you have to let me know if it's not right, but I think you studied earth science and economics in Amsterdam, and you became a PhD student, and you looked at how farmers influence the water system or can influence the water system. And at the moment, you work at the consultancy firm Equator, Groen en Ruimte, and you advise governments, land managers, farmers on the level of land, water, nature, and agriculture. Yeah. Then we have Peter Schrijver. You are part of the board of directors of Water Board Rijn and Ijssel. You look at management, monitoring of water systems, and drought in the Rijn and Ijssel. And we read an article from Trouw, I think it was last week, and you were in a place that was the driest in the Netherlands last year, and that's very interesting. So you must have some interesting insights on it as well. And you happen to be a dairy farmer, is what I was told. And finally, Klarien, you've studied land and water management at the Wageningen University. You used to be the coordinator of Boerengroep, and now currently you're the coordinator of Future Farmers, or Toekomstboeren. And on top of that, you're a market gardener at the WIlde Peen, and that's the farm you have in Ede, together with Maria van Manen. Yeah, and this picture right here actually is one we took from the excursion a few days ago. It kind of summed up this whole discussion evening, so that's really fun. But before we let the speakers speak, we have a question for the group, and that is, who owns water in times of scarcity? We'd like everybody to think about that for a good 30 seconds, and you can write your answer in the chat. I'll also write my answer, and we'll just go through those really quickly. So the question is, who owns water in times of scarcity? And what scarcity is, you can fill that in yourself, make your own definition. Melle raised the question already. Should there be a difference between ground and surface water? Very interesting question, Melle. That's also part of this question, is to create more questions and let people take the risk of providing us with an answer. So I see the province and the soil, local entities, Pachamama, the states. Klarien, you say getting the prices right is an illusion and will only lead to accumulation of power. Sophie's waterboard. Klarien, could you maybe specify that really quickly?
By typing, or
maybe
yeah,
you
it's like somebody's following up on it. What's her name? Oh, I have to enlarge this thing. Like Sarah is saying, yeah. So of course the idea is that putting money to it, a price to water, would make it more efficient and distribute it better. But that's not my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, and Joost also agrees with that. Water is a common good. All right. If you want to add anything else, feel free, but we're going to move on now. So thank you for that. I would like to give the floor to Melle. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And Melle, I think you can start sharing.
I'll unmute myself. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you make it full screen?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, my name is Melle Nikkels. The last 5 years I did a PhD, and it ended up, the title is Farmers as Water Managers. And I worked on it for the last 5 years. It was a collaboration between the Wageningen University, the consultancy firm that I'm working for now, which is called Equatorgroene Ruimte, and the University of Tasmania in Australia. When I was thinking about doing a PhD, I thought that in the Netherlands, water management is very Dutch. And then I thought that if I wanted to do anything with drought, and then I should go to another place. And I decided to go to Australia because I thought that there they have a lot more experience. But then I think I was, well, I wouldn't call it lucky, but then suddenly drought became a very hot topic in the Netherlands. And what I'm interested in, is how can farmers better collaborate with water managers to reach long-term system-level objectives. And in the Netherlands, this is about drought proofing, or making our landscape and our water system more robust. And we have a long-term objective or goal, 2100 in the Delta program. And in Tasmania, in Australia, they have a completely different long-term objective. So for the ones that don't know where Tasmania is, I didn't before I did my PhD there. It's a small island, a little bit bigger than the Netherlands, just south of Melbourne in Australia. And there are, well, these cases are of course very, very different. But what they have in common is that they both look at farmers to reach these long-term objectives. As I explained, in the Netherlands, we use them. We want to collaborate with farmers and to make our water system more robust. In Tasmania, the government wants to collaborate with farmers in a co-investment in large-scale irrigation schemes. And it's quite unique. They're building big pipes and new irrigation schemes, which is not that common in the world. And what they do this they say water is profit, water is jobs, to improve and increase and make the rural economies more robust. So with water, farmers can intensify and increase the agricultural output. And Tasmania has a long-term goal to increase the agricultural output and to have more jobs, more value creation. And and then they look at farmers to actually co-invest. So if farmers decide against buying water, the long-term objective of the state will not be reached. So in both cases, collaborating with farmers is very high on the political agendas. So if you talk about the value of water, I think water is quite a unique commodity. There is a right to water. Maybe some of you have heard about that, but that is about drinking water. And that already suggests all the different dimensions and that water can have. So water can have an economic value. It can also have a cultural value. It can have a social value. It can have an ecological value. And I think it has all of it. Value of water can be in using it, but also in not using it. For example, because it's water can have a value by just looking at it. The value of houses, a value of a house increases when it's when you have a view or when it's next to water. And it is very, very, very difficult to sort of trying to calculate or to better understand the value of water. And it differs per country, per region, per person, the time of the year, and also the legal system. In the Netherlands, that's very different than in Australia. And I think if you talk about the value of water in the Netherlands, not so long ago, this was a negative value. It was a cost. So I think Peter will talk about that later. Is water boards were set up to prevent against too much water. And I still think that in the Netherlands we do have too much water, but we now have to deal with too much at times, too little at times, and too dirty at times. And too dirty is mostly in the Netherlands too salt. But the salt problem in many, mostly the coastal areas in the Netherlands, increases when it's too dry. So then there is enough water, but it doesn't have the right quality. So to make this a bit more, well, practical, is that if I talk about irrigating water for staple crops, then does that water have a low or a high value? That depends on your conceptualization of it. Because in many countries, large-scale irrigation schemes have not been established to, I don't know, make a lot of profit, but to address food security and poverty, and to provide lower food prices and food security. So then maybe that water has a relatively low economic value, but a very, very high social value. In Australia, water was used to build the country, to provide jobs in rural areas. And it's often said that a drought, and with that higher wheat prices, triggered Arab Spring. Some people even say that it triggered the war in Syria, with people moving to the city, and well, which caused a lot of different sorts of pressures on the system. But some would say that started with a drought and farmers leaving their lands. So to think about the value of water, if you talk to, if you look at it from an economic perspective, you miss out on a lot of dimensions and values of water. And that is, it really, really depends on your perspective. And what one farmer would call dry may not be dry to another. What is too wet for one farmer might not be too wet for another. And then we're just talking about farmers. If you talk about all the users of water, then trying to manage their needs is a very, very difficult task. So my research was about talking about the value of water. And I came up with an approach to it. I call it participatory crossover analysis, in which I discussed the value of water, or the willingness to pay for water, in small groups. And in the Netherlands, I did this with a group of farmers in Walcheren in Zeeland. And this is a pilot area in which there are 8 farmers, and they try to manage the water system. Well, they try to manage the water system by themselves. I made a mistake here. This is the slide for the Netherlands, and I asked them, so how much are you willing to pay for water? Because they sort of all agreed that they should work on improving their water availability in summer. But when it came to investing, some said, yeah, let's go ahead because water is very valuable to me. And others said that they couldn't afford. And what my research showed is that these perspectives are changing. So 5 years ago, the average willingness to pay was less than it is now. And what is especially interesting is that it's not about the average, but it's about about a personal perspective. And well, this talk is too short to really go into detail, but what I think is interesting, especially when water managers and farmers collaborate, is where does the willingness, where do these differences come from? And farmers explained that it had partly to do with what they're growing, but also some very personal perspectives on the future, on their internal economy within their enterprise. But some of them, are willing to pay more than €3 per cubic meter, and others just 20 cents. And I'm not saying, I don't know what the value is, but this is a huge difference. And this more than €3 was in 2019, but this year, which I think is a lot of people, well, do not expect that in the Netherlands, is that there are now ships that transport water on water. So they are now transporting fresh water in Zeeland to farmers, which I think shows that we might be very good in the Netherlands in preventing floods and too much water, but that already after a couple of weeks of, well, less rain than we used to, that farmers have to come up with these crazy measures to be able to keep going, shows that we're not robust, and that I think, well, it makes me really worry about what the future brings. So I think valuing water, which can be an instrument to decide who gets what, is a very hot topic. And this is not only for end users, for farmers, but also for scientists and policymakers. And to me, at least in the Netherlands, and I think also in Australia, perspectives are rapidly changing. Farmers are now investing in water and in measures and in pumps, and they're doing things that they would say that they would never do 3 years ago. And I think it is a very interesting question, especially about when you think about who owns water. Is that in the Netherlands, it's the challenges are very, very different. So if you go to the Rijn and Ijssel, which Peter will talk about, I think, they're in a different situation than in Zeeland. And the province of Zeeland now says, well, because the situation is so unfair and we want to allow our farmers to be able to compete with other Dutch farmers, we should invest in the water system to make it more robust and to supply more water to these farmers, to just keep them going. But that is a public investment, of course, and well, this is one of the biggest, or a big question is how to deal with the regional differences within the Netherlands. So in parts of Friesland, even if it's very, very dry, farmers don't even notice. While in the Achterhoek, if it doesn't rain, there's no other way to supply or to get water than what you already have stored in the soil. And I think it is very important to better collaborate, and that is, of course, an open door. But I think that farmers can have a much bigger influence on the water system than they currently have. They can store a lot more water in the winter than they're currently doing, and that's not only better for them, but that's also better for water boards and us as Dutchies. And well, I think what would be good, especially if we were discussing it later, to have some definitions on who owns water, and the kaderrichtlijn water, which is well, one of the it's a European perspectives that is playing a big role in the Netherlands, is that water is not an ordinary commodity, but we're not really sure how to manage it as a commodity, and we now see it as a heritage that must be protected, defended, and treated as such. But then, of course, if you start, that doesn't mean so much when there's not enough, or when you have to come up with a rule that certain user gets so much and another user gets this much. If you have to divide or allocate water, it is actually often very practical. But the legal understanding of who owns water in times of scarcity is something that we don't know in the Netherlands, which is a bit worrisome. I'm very interested in Peter's perspective, but I'm now trying to come up with a big project with ministries, and this is based on the case in Zeeland. Is to better understand who owns water in times of scarcity and how to better allocate water when there's not enough. And currently, until farmers are told not to pump up water anymore, it is a little bit a wild west at the moment. And I think even within the sector, so between farmers, a more fair allocation and diversion of water is needed, because we have to better deal with shortages. And that's it. So
All right.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Melle. That was already a great start to this webinar, and it gives us a lot of food for thought. Yeah, I think Klarien had a question, but I think it was answered already. Do you have another question, Klarien?
Yeah, I have 1,000 questions, but later I'll be talking, so I don't know. If other people have questions, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe you want to start, if nobody else is. Do you have something to say about organic matter? Like I was thinking when you were talking about the role of farmers for society as a whole, and
Yeah.
also you were saying that I completely agree that we as Dutchies have to learn a lot in terms of storage. Like we still think there's abundance. I mean, we, like, I don't know everybody, but this is a problem. So my dream is that organic matter increase, because we need that for a lot of other reasons, is sort of playing a role in this story. Do you say something about that?
Yeah. There's technically, I mean, it's still we call that the sponge capacity of a soil. So, and if you increase organic matter, the soil is better able to hold on to water, to make it available for plants when it's dry. And that is a sort of rule of thumb, but how that works in practice is and the potential of increasing organic matter, it really depends on your soil and your water system. If you increase organic matter in Flevoland, I still think it's a good idea, but to better store water is maybe you can add an extra day or two in terms of water storage. But if you would be really able to store more water in the soil in the Achterhoek, then you can maybe you're able to bridge a drought of a couple of weeks. So the potential of organic matter in soils is
Sure. Yeah.
is a lot more complex than it sounds, and it depends on your type of soil. It depends on your water system. But I think it's a good idea for many reasons, not only for water.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, thank you. Extensive answer. Are there any other questions? You could raise your hand or just go ahead and blurt it out. Otherwise, we move to the next speaker.
Hello.
Yeah.
I have a question, Melle. Related to how the farmer should have to better store the water during the winter season. It's also related to the choice of the crop, maybe, and even if just arable crops, or maybe also the change to some perennials or permanent tree could play a role in that.
Well, the thing in the Netherlands is that farmers not only store, if they would, for example, increase their organic matter, or when they build small little wires in their ditches, that might be good for them, but that is also very good for the water board, because it allows the water to infiltrate, and it goes down into the groundwater, and then it sort of moves. It's not that it sits there. So storing water in the Netherlands is often for the farmer itself, but also for the system as a whole. So there are benefits locally, but also elsewhere in time and in space.
I don't understand. How do you mean? How to better raise the store capacity for the local farmer and also for the land? I mean, I think also that when you said that is how to better allocate the water during the period of lack, I think that also you were referring to something that was a bigger regional system of managing the water, and not only locally.
Well, this is it really depends on where you are, what farmers can do to improve the sponge capacity of the system, and it also really depends on your. I think you started off with what you grow. Farmers have been storing rainwater in our greenhouses for a very long time. And of course, if you are growing apple trees or fruit, and there is a water shortage, you need to keep your trees alive. So you can that's where these freshwater ships come from. They're all for fruit growers, because it's not only this year's crop, but it's if your trees die, it's done. And in the Netherlands, one of the well, I think quite unique challenges is that storing water above surface is very costly, because if you build a water basin, you cannot use that land to grow crops anymore. And the value of land in the Netherlands is extremely high if you, for example, compare it to Australia. So that also means that storing water comes with a bigger cost.
Yeah,
So
thank
that's
you.
why we're also looking at storing it, in the subsurface.
Thank you, Melle. I think Klarien might be able to go into this as well with some more practical experiences. But we should be moving on. Also, Sarah mentions how there's potential, and in Australia, the organic matter story is really good, really important. So let's move on then. And Peter, shall I share your presentation then?
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Can everybody see it?
I see it. So,
All right.
thank you very much. I'm Peter Schrijver. I'm a member of the board of executives from Waterboard Rijn and Ijssel. Next slide, please. Yep. And before we talk about drought, there's one thing we should know before. The Netherlands is a big delta. 26% of our soil is beneath sea level. And if we wouldn't have any dikes and dams, then 60% of our land would have a big risk of flooding. So that's our main reason to have water boards to keep our land secure. Next, please.
I guess I have to click it every time arrow doesn't work. Oh, here? Okay, there we go.
Yep. We've got water authorities to manage the regional water systems. We've got 21 of them. We're one of the oldest management structures in the Netherlands. Our water board is number 7. It's in the east part of Holland, near the German border. And this also means that there's a connection between our water system and the German water system. Almost 1/3 of our water comes from Germany. We consider ourselves experts on water safety, water quantity management, and water quality management, but more about that later. Next, please. Something about our water board. It's a regional governmental body. We've got a chair and 4 executives board members. Our chair is Hein Pieper. He's called the Dijkgraaf from our water board. And I'm one of the 4 board members. We've got a general management that contains 21 seats from political parties. They are elected, and 8 seats that are secured by specific groups. 3 seats from agricultural groups, 3 seats from companies, and 2 seats from nature. They are also democratically being chosen. For instance, the agricultural seats, the process of election is being done by the Farmers Union LTO. Next, please. Our main task, and they are by law, it's in the Waterwet. I already mentioned flood risk management, the handling of high water levels, improving our dike body because of climate changes. The risks of flooding systems of our systems is increasing, so we have to improve our dike bodies, and of course we have to maintain our dikes. The second task is water supply and maintenance. You see 2 pictures. We have a lot of weirs, stuwen in Netherlands, in our system, so we can keep the water level on a certain level, and we can manage that systems if there is any water. And of course, we have to maintain our water systems, for instance, by mowing the grass that's growing in it. And the third task is managing our wastewater. We've got a transport and clearing system for urban water from the cities, but also for industrial wastewater. And there's we've got, for instance, two farmer industry companies that we clear the wastewater from. One is called Avico in Steenderen, a big potato company. We clear the wastewater and we produce biogas from the sludge. And the biogas is being transported to Avico again, and they're frying our chips on it. The other example is Friesland Campina, a large dairy industry company. It has two factories in Borculo and in Lochem. And we collect the wastewater, and we've got a new process for clearing that wastewater, and it's being done by a Nereda reactor. And we produce Calmera. Calmera is a new kind of alginate. It's a new resource that we can recover from wastewater. It's really interesting. You can do a lot of things with alginate, and one of the things is that you can add it to the soil, and the capacity of catching water in the soil can be increased. Next, please. New challenges, climate change. Although new climate change is already happening, and we're right in the middle of it. It's not so new. There's a lot of discussion about the climate change, and discussion always goes over how fast it changes. But when you look at figures, we can actually see it changing. There are more periods of drought. We see more heavy rainfall. We see more heat stress. So that it occurs, there's no discussion about. There's more discussion about how fast it goes. And the latest point of views from scientists are that it's going very fast and faster than assumed before. Water management, there are two directions that we look at climate change. First direction is adaptation, and something more about that later. And the second is mitigation. We have to bring down our carbon footprint in the world, and also in the Netherlands, and also in our region. We've got an own goal in our water board, and we want to be energy neutral in 2025. That's the really near future, and we are building a large wind turbines to reach that goal. Next, please. Drought. I will give a short introduction of our water system, some facts and figures, and last but certainly not least, what can we do about that short term and long term, and also how can we do it, especially in cooperation, as Melle also mentioned. There are some pictures of what who have been shown in periods of drought, especially in 2018 and 19. Schools sent students home because it was too hot. There were big problems in nature reserves. Our historical heritages did suffer from the drought, and of course a lot of farmers had big damages in the crops. Next, please. There's a unique position from our point of view in the Netherlands. There's an intersection in the right figure. On the right, it's near to the German border, and on the left you see a gray section that's at Veluwe Massif, and right near to the Veluwe Massif, the lowest point there, the river Ijssel has its stream, and water flows from high to low, of course. There's a lot of meters difference in our area. And it also means that there are very few possibilities to let water in from the main rivers, or we have to pump it up, and that's quite expensive. It are high sand grounds in our region, and the water system, as mentioned, is connected to Germany. The positive side is that there are in our region no salt and salination issues. They have that in the west of our in the west of Holland, as Melle mentioned already. Next, please. When you take a closer look at the water balance per year, then we see rainfall and evaporation, and there's an overflow of rainfall. It even increased over the years, and evaporation also increased a little bit. So there is still a surplus of rainfall, but we do need a mind shift because we drained the surplus far too fast in the past years. So we didn't store enough for dry periods in summertime. So we do need a mind shift from draining the water to catch and store the water. And we have to be prepared for the two upsides of climate change, more flooding risk and more periods of drought. The right, the picture, sorry, one back please. The picture on the right, it shows again rainfall and evaporation, but also the drainage from the waterboard, 150 millimeters, and also leaking of the system, 150 millimeters, and withdrawal for drink water, industry, and irrigation. And the last three, when you plus them up, it's about 40 millimeters, and compared with evaporation, it's only a small amount of water that's being withdrawn from the groundwater system. And we really have to do something about the draining, the 150 millimeter that goes down to the River Ijssel. Next, please. Some facts and figures. There are three figures, 2018, 2019, and 2020. The black line is the actual year line. The red line is the previous record, 1976, and the blue line is the median. So you can see 2018 was drier than the previous record, and it was dry over the whole year, from early summer until late in spring. 2019, it started all right, but in early summer there was again a period of drought, and we had some rain in the early autumn. And this year also started very dry in spring. It caused a lot of problems for farmers with their crops. And we were very lucky to have some heavy rain 1.5 weeks ago. Also in some places, for instance, Winterswijk, there was a rain shower of 100 millimeters. So that's quite enough. Next, please. When you look at our water system, we've got big problems of no water in the system. So also problems for the ecological system in our water system. Farmers have problems with their harvest. We have water quality problems. Botulisme, blauwalg, blue algae is also one of the problems. We see an increasement of water usage by farmers, but also by citizens. A lot of gardens are being sprayed by water. Next, please. And then, of course, what can we do about it? Some measurements for short and for long term. First of all, some research and experiences. Only rainfall can help our region to recover. We can't let water in from the river systems. We are not below sea level, so we do need rain to recover the system. We have to catch and store the water when it falls, and that's mostly in winter time. And the groundwater is the engine that helps to recover our surface water system. Our challenge is that we have to be prepared for the drought side of climate change and the heavy rainfall side of climate change. I mentioned Winterswijk with 100 millimeters. That was handled all right. But in 2010, we had almost 170 millimeters in the region, and it caused a lot of damage in our water system, but also for agricultural farmers on the land. Potato crops were being destroyed because there was too long water on the land. More than 24 hours causes a lot of problems for potato farmers. And also there were some problems in some cities. So there are two sides of climate change that have to be dealt with. We need cooperation in the region. It's absolutely necessary. We can't do it alone. And there is no one size fits it all in our region. Next, please. Short-term measurements, catch water to recover the groundwater level. We can do that with our own water level management. We can manage our dams and our weirs. The weirs are stewing. We can do that better than in the past. We can keep the weirs up so we can keep much more water in the system. And there's also an opposite of it. When we do that, there's a higher risk of flooding from the water system. So we have to be very secure about that. But it's a possibility, and we did that the last 2 winters. We can activate landowners and farmers to place weirs in their own system, or petitions, skippy balls in their systems. It's a very practical measurement, and there's a lot of interest for farmers to do that. They can put it in their system to capture the water in wintertime, but it also can be very easy replaced when it's necessary to drain the water down. Awareness and communication to residents is needed. Simple measurements as rain barrels, but also more green gardens. We see more and more concrete in gardens. It's something that worries us a lot. So we have to do something about that together with municipalities. And of course, we can put a ban on the use of surface water. It's being done in 2018 and 2019. And also we can put a ban on the use of groundwater in protected nature reserves. We did that, for instance, in a Natura 2000 reserve called Stelkamsveld near Lochem, Borculo, and also in a reserve, the Zumpe by nearby Doetinchem. Next, please. Some long-term management. The drought on high sand ground is addressed on a national level. There was a recommendation called Landelijke Beleidstafel Droogte. And one of the conclusions was that we have to manage ground and surface water better. And groundwater supply is the focus for the east part of Holland. And of course, we also need some extra budget for that. And in June, the minister, Cora Nieuwenhuizen, announced an extra 100 million for the financing of climate change projects. We have to research new technologies, although new infiltration for drink water supply, for instance. I already told you that the withdrawal for drink water supply, when you compare it with the whole groundwater system, it's not that much, but locally it can have a large effect. So we can mitigate that by infiltrating water in the systems. We do that in a region called het Klooster. There we irrigate water from the veengoot, but it's not enough to compensate the complete withdrawal for drinking water. So we can think about getting water from the main river and pump it up. They also do it in the west part of our country. In the dunes, they infiltrate sweet water and pump it up for drinking water. We also have to do more research on a different water system. For instance, our crossing border river basins have to be evaluated and perhaps redesigned so they drain less and can capture more water in their whole river basin system. Next, please. And I already told you, and also Melle told that in his presentation, we can't do it alone. We have to do it together. So we have to cooperate in the region. We need shared responsibility to catch water the whole year. We have to have mutual analysis and also mutual action. For instance, in neighborhoods, green cities, climate stress tests, we do that with municipalities, but of course also with the residents and the water company. In the agricultural sector, we need a better soil flood balances. We do that with farmers, with water companies, but also with the chain parties as financial companies, but also feed companies as for farmers or the dairy industry as Friesland Campina. We have a project called Vruchtbare Kringloop. And one of the goals is to increase the organic matter in the soil. 1% increasement of dry matter means 1 circle of irrigation less. So that really is something. There's also another benefit of organic matter. If you can increase organic matter, it can also capture minerals better in the ground system, so they won't be wasted to our surface water. Next, please. Spatial planning. It's not our. We don't have the government of the spatial planning. It's being done by the province and the municipalities, but we have some really good information for those parties, so we collaborate a lot with them. And in the water system, we can optimize the system, and we do that together with the municipalities, with landowners, residents, farmers, but also environmental and nature organizations. And last but not least, innovation doesn't stop here. We need really new ideas for the future. You're all at Wageningen, so if you have any, be welcome and contact us. We're really looking forward for new ideas and innovation for our problems with climate change. Next is the last slide. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
All right, thank you, Peter. That was very clear. But we do have 3 questions for you. I'll start with Melle's question. Groundwater is used by farmers and for drinking water. Is there a long-term solution for drinking water in the Achterhoek?
That is a problem. There is a study going on at the moment. There is expected an increase for drinking water for 30%. The Achterhoek is a very, very vulnerable system for drinking water. So when you look at long-term solutions, it probably would be better to look at Veluwe Massif. There's a high volume of sweet water there. It comes up at the sides of it, Veluwe Massif in the IJsselmeer polders. It comes at the surface and eventually it's being drained in the IJsselmeer. So if we can be smarter to use that water Also for drinking water, it would be a better solution for long term. But in the meantime, there's a big infrastructure for drinking water also in the Achterhoek. So we have to cope with problems in the meantime. And one solution can be the mitigation of the problems, for instance, with the irrigation of sweet water.
Right, that was clear. And then another question is, isn't the phreatic aquifer in the area of Rijn and Ijssel quite shallow? Because I guess it comes as a surprise that it was the driest place.
Yeah, it differs. It's quite shallow in the east part of it, and when you go more to the west, when you looked at the intersection, it showed our groundwater system. So it's quite a difference in our region from east to the west.
Thank you. And then a final question from Klarien. Do you see the Netherlands as up to date in terms of water storing capacity? What stage are we, according to you, in the needed mind shift that you mentioned?
No, we're certainly not up to date and also not state of the art. We can do better. When I have to give our water board a number for how we're doing on capturing water, I think we're on the level 5. So we have to do a lot of work together with our parties.
5 out of 10 or 5 out of 50? 5 out of 10, I guess.
Yeah, 5 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess, does anybody else have a question really quickly? Otherwise, we can move to Klarien. I also had a small question, maybe. I'm wondering if it also shocks you when you show the slide about how you manage the dikes and maintain. I saw the slide with all the pictures, and all I was seeing was fossil fuel dependencies. There were trucks mowing and tractors and machines to maintain it. And I think that's came as a big shock to me. I don't know if you have something to say about that.
And shock from which point of view?
Well, I think eventually we're going to be in some fossil fuel crisis sooner or later, and if our whole system is so fragile, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's fragile, and we bringing down our carbon footprint is one of the biggest issues in our water board. What we use for maintaining the water system and the dikes, it's not that much. Our biggest use is in treating the wastewater system. So that's why we're building the wind turbines. But we have to do better. We can produce more biogas from our sludge, and when we do that in an optimal way, then we can provide our tractors and machinery with that, for instance.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe a last really, really short answer. I guess it's a 2-word answer. How thick is the aquifer in the western part of the area?
Sorry, how thick is?
How thick is the aquifer in the western part of the area? I guess I mean Achterhoek, or sorry, not Achterhoek,
but I can't answer that question. No, I don't know exactly. No.
Okay, thanks. Then I would like to move on to Klarien. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Melle. And Klarien, I guess the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I can try to do it like this, but I got a warning when I had my video on that my bandwidth was low. So maybe I don't know how smart it is.
You can
so
maybe
give me a
hide
sign.
your video.
It's already bad.
No,
sound
it's perfect. It's good.
Yeah. So can you give me a sign when the sound is going down? Then I just stop my video, and probably it will help. Now it seems as if I'm in a real rural area where the bandwidth is very low, but it's actually not the case. But many farmers who I have meetings with, they really have problems with bandwidth. But anyway, okay. Yeah, first I want to sort of not really apologize, but to reflect on what just happened. So I asked Melle about organic matter. What happened when I post questions on Facebook about drought? That many people reply, can't you just mulch? Can't you just put up some leaves or something on the floor to maintain moist? And that would have been my idea as well, but there needs to be water to store water. So if it's just dry and people ask what to do, and people say mulch, you cannot mulch because there's no water. You need water to make mulch work, also with organic matter. So, okay, this is just to start with. I put the last picture, I just put some pictures in the PowerPoint together. This is the last picture. This is, in a way, maybe sort of a, well, it used to be our dream. It used to be our dream scenario where you have a drip irrigation sort of thing that is a sweat. It was the Flemish people who taught me this, because they say druppeldarm, and then I thought, oh, it's a typical Flemish word. What a joke! But it actually exists, druppeldarm, where it just transpires the water. But my companion in the garden, she's very organic, and she is afraid, because this thing, it really smells like rubber and it breaks all the time. So we are afraid it's also leaking rubber, and also it doesn't work because in the beginning it drips more than in the end. Of course, maybe if they're new and you put a lot of pressure, maybe it works very well. So this was our dream, but what's below it, of course, still is our dream. It's a very nice, well, Dutch farmers call it herb mixture, but herb is a bit strange maybe, but anyway, a mixture of many kinds of vegetation with many kinds of functions, penetrating the soil, sequestering carbon, all those things. That's what we have on our paths. How do I now go to, yeah, look, this is what what you see here is what we have. So you see the smalle weegbree and the clover and all those things. We have it on our paths between the vegetables. And this is in general, it's a very nice idea. Only when there's drought, the grass takes water as well. And also when we have to invest, because that's what we have to do. We have to now invest in a pivot, like center sprinkler irrigation thing. But then we are irrigating water. That's stupid. Irrigating grass. That's a waste of. I mean, yeah. Okay. So let me just start from the beginning. This is us. I am Klarien. You can see me still on the video. So I'm also live. And the other one is Melle. We have CSA garden in Ede. We started on this location. We, her and me, we started last year, so 2019. And she has been a gardener for 15 years and me for 10 years, working in several places. In 2018, we didn't have a farm. This is important. I was in Brazil and she was searching for land. So 2018, we didn't have a farm. So 2019, it was for us the first reality check moment. Yeah, because we used to not irrigate ever. Like we irrigate. This is our motto. The way we farm, we irrigate. What is plantjes? Little ones. We irrigate, yeah, and we irrigate tomatoes, zucchini, and maybe some aubergine, something like that. That's it. We don't irrigate vegetables because they can take care of themselves in the Netherlands. Actually, when I was in Brazil, I had to learn how to irrigate because I thought I knew how to put lettuce or something in the soil, but like the whole mindset, you have to accompany a plant with water. It was completely new. So yeah, 2019 April we started like this. It was completely flat, and actually the landowner was so kind for us to flatten it as well. Like they plowed it and then they flattened it to prepare it for grass. So it's very, 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 very hard, the soil. If we have a bamboo stick, you know, the one that's like maybe 1 centimeter or less, to stick it in, it's not on the picture, but it's really, really hard soil, which can be good because if there's like the water, well, depends, but it's not so nice for vegetables. So we started on bare land. We started, yeah, more or less like this. And so we grow vegetables for 100 people and they harvest it themselves. So we only need to weed and seed and plant and irrigate. To have the questions for, can't you do something with perennials? This talk is about drought, but cannot not touch the topic of land. It was already talked about 2 times. I was really, it made me really think that Melle said that, because also people suggest, when we talk about drought, people suggest, can't you store water like we do, for example, in tanks? And Melle said, and this is very important, the land is so expensive in the Netherlands, that this is a costly thing to store water above ground, but also it's not easy if you want to start as a new entrant farmer, if you want to buy land and keep it, if you want to have long-term access to land, and the easy way of thinking is to buy it, of course, because the tenant agreements in general are very short. So therefore I put this picture to show, yes, we want trees, but we need long-term access to land. Otherwise we cannot put trees, or we will not, it doesn't make sense. We do it, we have a 1-year contract, but this is just a random tree just to make a statement. Oh yeah, so I was saying we weren't used to irrigate, yeah, so we noticed we needed some water for our seedlings. Mind me, we I don't know how to speak proper English anymore. We hit a pole, some unit, 4 meters and 20 centimeters into the soil, reaching the first, I don't know if it's the first aquifer or just hanging water, I don't know, reaching some water, and we pumped with this thing. It worked, it was nice for the seedlings. But then it was 2019, so yeah, we noticed some lettuce flowering, we noticed some Chinese cabbage flowering, things that normally never happen in May or June. So it was dry, so we had to make a decision. And in the end, very, very late, of course, as a market gardener, somewhere in June, we decided to call for some guys and put this well. So the yellow PVC pipe tube unit is 6 centimeters wide, and it's 13 meters into the soil. And with this thing, because we don't have electricity there, we have a generator from Marktplaats, very old thing, and a very small, simple pump. And it fills up 4 of those tanks. So we can easily, so it fills up 1 and the rest gravity fills the other 3. So we have 4,000 liters in different places in the garden ready to use. Which was nice to have for the tomatoes, for the seedlings. And occasionally, sometimes, for example, when you seed carrots need 3 weeks to sprout, to start going. So during 3 weeks, circumstances have to be perfect. Yeah, and it has to be in the first 3, 4, 5 millimeters of the soil. So they have to be good, So we watered them like this. The seeds. So if it's a dry time, you normally you seed in trays at home or somewhere where you can observe and water them. But sometimes some things like carrots, for example, you cannot transfer them, so you seed them directly. So we watered them like this by hand. Okay, so we had this system, and also some drip irrigation things. But we have 0.8 hectares. I don't know the number, but to have for every line of crops, like the beds are 30 meters. So for example, here you see the spring onions, there are like 5 lines, right? So you need to have 5 times 30 meters, and this is like 60 times, so it's really, and also then you cannot cultivate the land. So drip irrigation for general vegetables, it's not, maybe it's nice, a nice moment to make a connection to my past life. I studied international land and water management. So the bachelor was mainly about irrigation and water management, where I really, really learned that drip irrigation is the most efficient way to I learned to calculate water use efficiency and all those things, and I learned actually that people in Africa, for example, according to efficiency reasons, they should use drip or micro sprinkler maybe, and all the rest is a waste of water. And after graduating, I was supposed to fly to other countries and tell other people how to improve their water use efficiency. That's what I was trained for. But I noticed that I didn't really agree with that, to, as a European, take an airplane, go somewhere and tell other people about drought and mountains and stuff. Yeah, so my master was about erosion, soil and water conservation. Yeah, so I'm an engineer in soil and water conservation. Now here on my farm, of course we are a bit maybe creative and low budget in a way. Of course there are also people, we could also try to go to Rabobank, but well, there are pros and cons to everything. But it was very interesting experience to notice that I was supposed to tell other people what to do with my MSc in water engineering, and then we have to make decisions that are not easy because, yeah, you can calculate what's the most efficient, but you have to weigh out things. For example, will my investment be paid back? You know, it's a very simple logical question. And with agriculture in the Netherlands, do not. Especially the land will not be paid back with primary production, let's say. So irrigation, and this is the question that I had after Melle's presentation, because agriculture, I know this is about agriculture and society, but agriculture in the Netherlands is in crisis.
Klarien,
People stop all the time.
could you repeat that,
wrap up.
Klarien?
I have to.
You were lagging. You were glitching.
And do I have to wrap up as well? How much time do?
Sure, that would be nice too. You have 5 more minutes, but
Okay.
sometimes you were
Okay.
glitching.
Okay, I will try to talk slower. Maybe sometimes it helps. Yeah, so the question I have, so the experience I personally have is that I found it very nice and very cool to experience the choices that you have to make as a farmer, and that they are so different from the ones you make on a computer or in computing the best decisions. Yeah, just to illustrate the graphs and figures on weather records. They had Peter showed some weather records. They're records all the time in terms of everything almost. They are really like you can sort of take them. You can sort of take the information and put it somewhere. But if you are growing crops, you feel them. You know, it's really. For me, this was not. It's not nice. It's also very ugly because you have to acknowledge that climate change is going on, and you have to take action, and you have to admit that maybe horticulture without irrigation in the Netherlands is history. You know, this is not nice. But it's for me. I find it interesting to experience it in real life instead of, you know, advising farmers about it without feeling anything of it. This is what I like. But it's not, I don't see a solution, especially now when we talk about a bigger scale than just my garden. So the question, I just asked also Peter, and I also hear Melle say it. In the Netherlands, we are not used to store water. In that sense, we're not used to store it for drought in summer. So we have to learn. I don't, yeah. I'm very curious how agriculture, like as a society, we have to choose what kind of agriculture do we want, what kind of agriculture do we want to support, and it's already very, very expensive relatively in the Netherlands compared to Ukraine or Brazil or somewhere else where they can also produce powder milk or beef and dairy, chicken. So we have to really decide as society where we want to go. And drought is making this decision even more interesting, let's put it that way. I want to, because I put some bullet points, I want to just finalize with 2 things. I noticed that when we mention as gardeners, when we mention to people that it's a bit dry, then people say, oh, but there will be it will not be permitted anymore to tap water, right? Because they read the news about the drinking water in the swimming pool issues. And then I'm a bit, like, so if we couldn't tap water anymore, then we will not have vegetables. We cannot produce vegetables. And of course, the question is, do we need to produce vegetables in Ede? You can wonder. But if they're not produced in Ede, they'll be produced somewhere else with irrigation. People don't know this. The Netherlands people don't realize that food is produced with water. And normally we don't see it. And now we start to see it, and people will be you know, this is a reality that they don't want to see, just like many things in agriculture. People don't, like, yeah, urban people don't realize, so this is something. Okay, last thing, very last thing, this year, 2020, when we started in the spring to work on the land, half of our field, we couldn't start to cultivate in March. We couldn't start to cultivate it yet because it was flooded. Yeah, so many crops that we left some things there for the insects and for the beauty of it, some cabbages and things, they died in many areas because it was flooded. There was no oxygen in the soil, and we couldn't enter in March. I think maybe it was almost April, and we wanted to start to prepare the land. It was flooded, and then 1 month later it was dry. You know, so it's a really there's something going on. We really have to you know, adapt. Okay, that was it. I'll stop now.
All right, thank you, Klarien. Are there any clarification questions, really quick for Klarien? And if not, then
Maybe I can add that this is for a lot of farmers a huge challenge. And if you look at water and evaluate when it's too dry, the consequences of water on crops often is still too much. So the balance between trying to store water for when you need it and trying to get rid of water when it's raining, especially in January and February, is a huge challenge for a lot of farmers. So
but everybody else
trying to store water can also lead to more flooding.
Everybody else already has this challenge. Portugal, I don't know where, everywhere. It's just we're used to be very luxury that we didn't have this issue, but it's how agriculture works in the whole world.
No, I don't think that a lot of other countries have this challenge.
Why?
I think that a lot of other countries have to save water for times when it's not enough. But the situation where it's really trying to find the balance between getting rid of too much water and storing water for when you need it is a I'm not saying it's unique, but it is that's different in Portugal or in Australia.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Good food for thought. Maybe I can share the screen really quick then, if we can move on to the final part, because I see we have about 9 more minutes, and Melle, you had to go at 9, if I'm correct. So we'll be, and I see another question. We'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, so there's going to be, instead of 2 statements, we'll just do 1 statement, because we went a little bit over time. That's okay. And for questions directed at each other or at the speakers, keep your questions short and allow space for others to react. Thank you. And yeah, so this is the first statement, and hopefully whoever wants to comment on this from the speakers, please feel free. Farmers have a major influence on water policy. Draining water quickly, as we have heard, is especially beneficial for the farmer, and in some cases. Now that water will have to be conserved more, is it important that we as citizens start paying farmers for ecosystem services that follow from more sustainable water management? So Peter, maybe you'd like to react on this. I think this is also towards the water board.
Yes, I can react on that. Oh, there's an echo in it. Of course, in the past, the draining went too quickly, and it was on behalf of farmers, but also in behalf of neighborhoods. It's a way of developing our country, but now we see the opposite side of it, and it has to be conserved more. The first challenge is to conserve it in a way that the use of farmland can be done as in a most optimal way for the farmer. And there are some opportunities for that. I mentioned for instance, the skippy balls, and that if we have to go any further, if we have to use a land that it's not no longer productive anymore or less productive, then we come in a system that we have to compensate the farmer for that, and that's a form of ecosystems that we have to pay with each other, and we've got a tax system in our water board that we can use for that.
All right, thank you. Would anybody else like to react either to Peter or to the statements? Feel free.
I would be very curious. If a lot of people would argue that already citizens are paying a lot to maintain the water system as it is, because in the Netherlands, which is quite unique, the water board can they can tax every citizen. So there's a water tax in the Netherlands, and some people would argue that this water tax is mostly used to supply water to farmers, and not, well, if you're an average citizen, you could ask whether that is good for you as a person. And I think this drought also leads to people saying, well, actually, farmers should have less influence on the water system.
Yeah, but then the question is, do we need to produce food in the Netherlands? Economically, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, or should we pay more for water as an individual farmer? You can pump up water for free in Ede, or you have to pay electricity. But you use something. This is, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you're using a common good as to produce food, or to have a business.
Yeah, no, but indeed, absolutely. No, I'm just saying that. But this is another topic, of course. I'm just saying that the question: do we need to produce? Do we want to produce food in the Netherlands? I miss it in policy discussions, because then you can continue the reasoning and talk about water, but if bulk food is a commodity, then the water will have to make sense to price the water and say, oh, it's just another cost, and then more farmers will go bankrupt.
The long-term discussion, and I think this is, and I don't have solutions, but there are parts in the Netherlands where the soil and water system are more favorable for crops. And there are parts in the Netherlands where other functions are also important. And I do think that with climate change, there are, this is a political discussion, is whether we should have a system that allows farming to happen everywhere, or whether so water follows function, or function follows water. And that would mean that in some parts of the Netherlands, maybe you're not allowed to pump up water anymore, which would be a huge challenge for farmers, of course. And this discussion isn't it?
It's not a new discussion. We did have that kind of discussions, for instance, when we talk about Natura 2000 areas. Nature is prior there, and there's not enough space for farmers in a lot of regions. So we have to deal with that, and we have to compensate farmers for instance, to go elsewhere, or to produce more in an extensive way.
What I found remarkable about Peter's answer to the statement, because the statement is asking, should we pay farmers for ecosystem services, like sustainable water management? And Peter's answer was about compensating farmers if their production is less, which of course is the logic, current logic, but the idea is the other way around. The idea is, as society, we want water to be stored, and farmers can do it.
Yeah, but I think this question is, it happens already. So the water board is co-investing with farmers. So they to for example, better store. And this is and storing water and allowing more water in the system is you can see that as an ecosystem service. So this already happens.
Yeah.
And I fully agree with it. I think it's very important to co-invest, because the benefits of improving the storage capacity of the system is not only for the farmer but also for the system.
Yeah.
There's new actual measurement in our region. It's called DAW, Delta Plan Agricultural Water Management. And we've got now a measurement then when if farmers build new weirs in their water system, in the local water system, we can give a subsidy of 40 or 50%, and it's a combination of subsidy from the water board and European subsidies.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Very interesting comments. Louise, I think you also had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. Does anybody else have a last burning question? Because I see it's 9 o'clock and we might finish 3 or 4 minutes over. Yeah, go ahead. Because this conversation's obviously never finished, I think.
There was one in the chat from Sarah.
Oh yeah, and what was that again? About,
Are things like keyline plowing and swales, etc., applicable here on this low flat land? In other places, it has been shown to be very helpful to slow down water flow and help it in both wet and dry times.
Yeah, interesting question.
Maybe I can answer.
Okay.
There's not a lot of hills in the Netherlands. We already do this in Limburg, but to do this in Flevoland doesn't make sense. It stops water from flowing down.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty straightforward answer, and also Klarien answered like where to store the water as well. Yeah, are there any last questions?
Oh, I turned off my video.
Right. Well, if not, then I would like to thank our 3 speakers. And there's that video again, moving picture, and participants too for actively listening. And there were some nice questions. I hope that the people who came tonight got an idea of what's going on in the world and concerning droughts, and especially in the Netherlands, and how we're looking at it and how to look at it. The most effective ways, perhaps, to start a dialogue and work together. And then, yeah, for more information on the subject, you can either contact us or check out what Melle, Klarien, and Peter are doing. And if you guys want to get involved, you can check our Boerengroep Facebook and Instagram, go to our website, or subscribe for our newsletter, and we'll keep you updated on this topic as well. I see there's one more thing in the chat, and oh, I wish I said thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you as well, speakers. I hope you were able to get your messages across in the way you wanted to. For me, this was all new, so thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And I'll stop screen sharing now. There we go. All right. Well, I guess that ends and concludes this webinar.
Thanks for organizing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, I'm glad that didn't happen in the middle.
No.
Alrighty. Yeah, perfect. And we can hang out a little bit longer. Anybody wants to chit chat? I'm gonna talk to Joost, Aaron, and Esther, co-organizers of today, and just to see if there's anything follow-up that we want to do. Also, yeah. Also, by the way, Klarien, ik heb toch wel een aantal berichtjes gekregen van mensen die vonden de WIlde Peen heel leuk. En ja, misschien zijn ze geïnteresseerd om nog een keer langs te komen om te gaan werken of zo.
Yeah, nice. We hebben werk zat. Everybody's welcome to join reading because we have a lot of work.
Yeah. All right. Oh, I can stop recording.